Hello everybody and welcome to the Common Running Mistakes series. My name is Dr. Cameron Garber and I'm here with Preston Johnson of Wasatch Run Club, and we're really excited to be here today to talk about some of those common running mistakes. And today we're talking about something near and dear to my heart and something that Preston is really good at. And so why don't you introduce it for us?
Yeah, so our topic today is going to be prehab versus rehab. We're talking treating your aches and pains before they turn into something that's going to be an injury that causes you have to have rehab on it instead of taking care of it before it gets serious.
Right, and so again, something really close to me, I believe in prehab, in treating things before they become a problem, before we get injured. I think it's so critical that if we can do that so that we avoid the injury in the first place, it'll help a ton. So pardon our noise and maybe a little dust. We're here at a trailhead at the Fruity Loops in Fruit Heights. So we may have some cars rolling through and things like that, like this one right here. That may make some noise and whatnot, but we love to get out on the trail and do some runs and stuff like that. I ran on this trail just today. The
natural environment just adds to the appeal of the video.
Right. And so we really want to cover this topic. First, we want to give a few shout outs to Run for Fun and Utah Running Shop for their support of these videos and support of Body Smart and everything that I do. So shout out to them. As well as Preston has some shout outs too.
Yeah, I want to thank my personal sponsors that have helped me in my athletic career, Solomon Running and Gnarly Nutrition. They've both been huge pieces of my training and really my success in the running world. Yeah. And then just starting out, something that I'm launching, the Wasatch Run Club. Cameron mentioned it already.
Yeah.
Awesome group. We're going to have some group runs, weekly challenges, just things to get people out and enjoying running and building the running community.
Yeah, that'll be fun to be a part of and participate in. So awesome stuff. So the idea behind prehab versus rehab and what the differences are and why that's important. Everybody thinks about physical therapy as being more rehab oriented, and for the most part they're right. Like, that's kind of the idea. I personally, in my practice at Body Smart, we definitely practice more prehab than rehab. My goal is to get runners in and to get them treated before it becomes an injury. If we can help you stay on the road and stay healthy in training, that's way more beneficial in my opinion. So my goal is to actually keep people healthy, and that's where prehab comes in and how I kind of interact with people. And Preston is one that uses that a lot.
Yeah, I'm in his clinic at least once a week doing some sort of either training or getting treatment, something just to keep myself out on the road, feeling fresh, feeling ready to go. Coming back to the importance of prehab, it boils down to being that consistent factor we want in our training. If you're doing prehab and maintain things as you go, you're going to have less time where you have to take time off, whereas with rehab, you're going to have blocks of training spaced out between times of having to take time off, really breaking up that consistency factor that we want to see in runners and that you want to see in yourself.
Right. Oh yeah, the consistency is so key. That's really where we make progress, is through consistency of training every day, every training period, that we're sticking with a specific plan. And so if we're always having that interrupted by the next little set of niggles that can turn into injuries that keep us from running, then that's a huge setback. And so that's the key, is if we can do things that keep us on the road, then we're going to be better off as a runner altogether. And so let's define what that looks like. So what's the difference between rehab and prehab? Really, rehab is getting you back from an injury, waiting until there's something really wrong, and then doing what we can to get your strength back, your mobility back, and get you feeling like you could start to run again. Prehab is keeping you running through the niggles, through a little bit of pain, and finding out ways that we can help keep you going. And so whether that's treatment, sometimes we do specific treatment, sometimes it's nutrition, sometimes it's rest, sometimes not rest very often. Relative rest is what I always say. I'm not a big fan of people just stopping running, because your risk of injury is actually higher afterward. So I prefer that we do more of a relative rest, where we cross train or do some other things. What has that looked like for you in your training?
Yeah, for me, prehab comes in many different forms. He mentioned quite a few of them. Kind of my general routine is, obviously I'll go for my run, do my workout, and every day I have some sort of strength routine incorporated into what I'm doing. And so I like to do it where I am kind of doing it by muscle groups per day. And so one day I'll focus on, my legs, another I'll focus on my upper body, and then another I'll focus on like some kind of a balance or speed work type stuff, agility training. And so that's a big part of my prehab, making sure that my tendons, my muscles are all strong enough that I'm not going to have issues with overloading that tissue. Yeah. And we covered that quite a bit in our episode 1 of the series, overloading tissue. And so very important when it comes to prehab and rehab as well. Aside from the strengthening factor, it comes down to the modalities that we have available to us to be able to do that kind of stuff. So some of the stuff that I've used within Body Smart's clinic, they have the compression boots from Air Relax that basically squeeze your legs and help drain out all the extra stuff that come from working out.
Yeah. So they just help you feel fresh. If nothing else, right? They help your legs feel fresh. It feels pretty good and keeps you, from getting too tight or feeling too bogged down from the run. I like them. I think it feels pretty good. There's varying evidence as to how much it helps clinically, but I think mentally it helps a lot. Yeah,
and it's something you can do while you're just sitting there and relaxing. And that's what I love about it. I can just sit there and scroll through social media or do something else that isn't necessarily engaging your mind towards working out, because once you start adding all this stuff on top of each other, it becomes very burdensome, and so it's something you can just kind of sit back and relax. Another kind of thing that I like along those lines is ice baths. And again, there's conflicting research with that as well, but and so it comes down to personal preference. Don't try it out if you haven't done it before a race. Try it out with your training, see how it works for you. For me, I personally like it. I felt like if anything, it just helps me cool down and get my back to just normal, I guess.
So a lot of people have felt like it helps in recovery and just in feeling good, and again, helping your legs to feel fresh and helping you, even if only mentally, helps you kind of recover. That's great. So there's a lot of things like that. One thing I get asked all the time is, like, what should I be doing for recovery? What should kind of the best step be? So I get asked about stretching and foam rolling, and you go on just about any Facebook group or any kind of comment blog of some sort where people can voice their opinion, and people will say, oh, what should I do for this injury or that injury? And you hear all the time stretching and foam rolling. Honestly, I'm not a big fan of stretching and foam rolling. Clinically, not a lot of evidence to support stretching, especially. Foam rolling, maybe a little bit. Really, it helps in the moment, helps you kind of relax and feel better. So if you like foam rolling, but there's no evidence that hard foam rolling, like making it really hurt and be painful, is any more helpful than light foam rolling. And so there's really no reason to make it torturous and painful. And there's really no major clinical benefit. There's no change in the tissues at all. You're not working out knots. You're not doing myofascial release. In fact, most studies would suggest that myofascial release doesn't really even happen. But that's a whole nother topic. But so really, if I were to say that the one thing you should do for your prehab, the one thing that you should do to avoid pain and problems and to recover more quickly, it's actually strength training. Stretching, again, no evidence. There's actually more evidence that stretching will harm you than there is stretching will benefit you. And so wouldn't recommend stretching, especially pre-exercise. If you like doing yoga or Pilates or something like that, that's different than stretching, and can be very helpful. So movement to end range, where you're actively moving to an end range and holding a position and moving back out of that, is different than, like cramming your foot against the wall and stretching your calf that way, where it's a passive stretch and hold, and it's passively done instead of an active movement through that range of motion. There's been no evidence to suggest that stretching like that helps, whereas like yoga and Pilates can be helpful in mindfulness and movement and using your muscles throughout the full range, and so they can be helpful. So it just depends on how you define what stretching is, but those types of things. So I think a yoga or a Pilates session every so often can be a helpful part of prehab, especially if that feels good for you and helps you feel loose. Now at the same time, that being said, there's actually evidence that having tight hamstrings and tight glutes and things like that is actually beneficial to your running. Not being able to touch your toes doesn't really matter, and has actually been correlated with faster running times and running speeds, and there's no correlation to injury in having like tightness in your hamstrings or decreased flexibility, like being able to touch your toes. In fact, a really funny story that I heard was of Eliud Kipchoge, when they asked him about that, about being able to touch his toes, and he's like, I can barely touch my knees, right? So like one of the fastest guys on the planet is really, really tight. Another mountain athlete was asked about that one time, about what his stretching routine is, and he said, I don't have one. And they're like, why do you not stretch? Why do you not stretch? And he said, because I don't want to get injured.
Yeah.
And I found that really fascinating to hear, at some of those elite levels, that people talking about that's more discovered. Whereas in kind of common what you hear people tell you, plantar fasciitis, people tell you to stretch your calves. Personally, I think that's one of the worst things you can do. And so it really just depends on what you think feels good and helps you relax. But doing some kind of work like strength training or yoga or Pilates or all of the above really can help you to relax and refresh your muscles and help you feel good. And we've talked ad nauseum about how strength training benefits runners and why it's the most important. But strength training has actually been shown to loosen muscles and help you have better range of motion when done properly than just about anything else.
Yeah, and I've seen that quite a bit in my training. There was kind of a breaking point about 2 years ago in my training, and I'd just come back from hip surgery, a whole list of injuries prior to that. Most people had kind of thought, he's done running, he can't stay healthy. And I attribute a lot of that success afterwards of being able to stay healthy for the last 2 years to strength training for that reason.
Yeah.
Been very beneficial for me, and
huge
prehabbing injuries, potential injuries, things that come up.
Right. So one of the things you can do if you notice that you have one of the things Preston deals with often is a posterior tibial tendonitis, or essentially that kind of inside side of your shin, kind of a shin splint type feel that goes all the way down into the feet and can cause a symptom similar to a plantar fasciitis and stuff like that. Really fairly common among runners, and one of the biggest things you can do there, rather than stretch it out or whatever, or foam roll it, is actually to spend more time strengthening those tissues so that they have greater resilience, so that when you run, it's not beating those tissues up so much. By foam rolling it or stretching it or whatever, the feeling of tightness may be there, but it's not actually a decrease in range of motion that's the problem. So that's why stretching doesn't help, right? Stretching your calves, for example, if you've got tight calves or Achilles problems, most likely you actually don't have tight calves in terms of lack of range of motion. So stretching that out isn't really going to help, and stretching hasn't been shown to increase range of motion. So really, that's where strengthening, building up the tolerance of that tissue, really is going to be more important and better. But
when you're strength training, you're bringing essentially your muscle through that full range of motion anyway.
You should.
That's the goal of what we're doing.
Yeah, you should.
That's when you're going to get the best results from what you're doing, and so that essentially is doing what you think stretching is doing for you.
Right. Absolutely. So, yeah, not to beat that dead horse too much, but really
we like strength training a little bit.
Right. Well, it has just clinically been shown to be the most important thing, best thing you can do, and most helpful at keeping you injury-free and prehabbing. So as far as common mistakes for runners, I would say that's the biggest one, is not strength training enough and taking the time out to strength train those areas where you may have the niggles and may be hurting, and that will keep you healthy and safe and on the road. And then some of those other modalities like you talked about, we do a lot of soft tissue work in terms of like A-stim, so scraping, or I-stim, instrument assisted soft tissue mobilization. We do that a lot in the clinic, and no matter kind of where you come down on it, the idea is it helps you feel better and move better and perform better. So I really like using that, but again, in the end, when not combined with strength training, it's not really going to do very much by itself. Mm-hmm. So that's the key. But there's a lot of things we can do in the clinic to help you feel better, to help keep you on the road. And then we use the strength training to keep those gains that we just got.
Yeah. The last kind of thing that I want to touch on is ways that you can successfully prehab.
Yeah.
So what you want to focus on to be able to know when you should be doing whatever modality you think is most appropriate. And so it comes down to really just knowing your body, understanding, like Cameron mentioned, my weak point, I guess, is that posterior tibialis muscle, the soleus muscle, getting tight or being beat up, essentially.
Yeah.
And so whenever I start to feel anything there, I know, like, okay, I gotta take this seriously. This is something that's caused issues in the past. This isn't something that I should take lightly. Yeah. And so that's when, in my mind, I make the decision that I need to go in and get something treated on, or I need to focus on extra strength work there, or dial back the training, whatever it is that is going to be there. And so that's going to be different for everyone out there. And so that's going to come down to you, which is really paying attention to, how you feel throughout a run, and writing it down in your training log. Keeping knowledge of that kind of stuff is going to give you the ability to look back in the future and be like, okay, like when I went and did this workout, it had this result on the pains that I had, and it caused this effect. So you can go back and really be a preventative tool there by having a training log of preventing future issues associated with that same problem.
Yeah, I think a training log is a great way to kind of prehab, by having kind of a history of what has and hasn't worked in the past that you can reflect on. I think being reflective in anything in life, but in your running, kind of looking back and being able to be reflective of what hasn't worked and what's helped you the most is really important. All right, so there you have it. There is kind of that common running mistake, and hopefully that's helpful to you, that you've kind of learned something from that, where you can help build up your body and stay healthy and safe and active and keep running, stay on the road. So common running mistakes. Thanks so much for joining us on this episode, and we'll catch you on the next one.